Welcome everyone, it's Rain and Noodles back at it again with the buzzing that I have zero idea where it's coming from. Today, my friends, we are witnessing a battle of the ages. Everyone knows Resident Evil. It's one of the biggest video game franchises ever, and was the direct inspiration for many of the greatest horror games ever made. For many years actually, it used to be the biggest Capcom series until Monster Hunter eventually overtook it in 2018 and stayed that way since. We are looking at the birthplace of a series of games that have revolutionized the entire industry. We have Resident Evil to thank for the term survival horror. We have Resident Evil 4 to thank for the over-the-shoulder camera. We have Resident Evil 7 to thank for one of the most advanced game engines ever built in the industry. But what's better than a game that was so amazing, it popularized and evolved an entire genre? A remake of that same game that set out to do it all over again. Which leads many people to wonder, which version should you play? Which one should be considered the better game? Out of these two phenomenal games, if you could only have one, which one? Getting your hands on the original Resident Evil would mean either emulating it or finding a working PlayStation 1 or Sega Saturn. Both tasks that would seem not worth the hassle or not even possible for some people. Let's not forget the confusing number of different versions of Resident Evil 1 that preceded the remake as well. Just how exactly are you supposed to nail down which one of those to play? But if you played Remake instead, are you missing out? Are you losing something that was there to propel the series in the first place? Today is the day we finally answer this question. I have sat down and created a series of categories for each of these games to compete in, and the winner of each one will be awarded 1 point. We're gonna score this like a fighting game grudge match, just to add to the tension. I'm going to keep improvising new categories, and then the first game to get to 10 points will be the winner. I've tried to base every one of these categories off of something that I think a newer player would care about. Now, before we get too invested, the game that loses is still a great game and worth playing on its own. But in a competition like this, there can only be one first place. Here's hoping this is a fight that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. I'm just as curious as you are actually. Not even I know who will win until the end of this video. Which reminds me, if you watch this video and you end up liking it, why don't you help out Jill with beating up that subscribe button? Keep it in the back of your mind. That's the end of my shilling. With all that bullshit out of the way, here comes the battle of the generations you've been waiting for. Let's start off by talking controls. The early Resident Evil games are infamous for what are lovingly called tank controls. Essentially, the only direction your character can move is forwards and then much slower backwards. There is absolutely no strafing in Resident Evil 1. Pressing left or right simply rotates your character. Depending on who you ask, this is either a good or a bad thing. Some say it's immensely frustrating and a huge turnoff, and it makes reacting to enemies or even just navigating the mansion way more difficult than it really needs to be. For some, it's one of the things they love most about these games. It makes the game scarier and much more challenging. I personally belong in the latter, but regardless of how you feel, if you play the original Resident Evil, you'll be forced to put up with this. Now, let's look at the remake. The remake technically also suffers from this problem, depending on what version of the remake you have. If you're playing the original remake for the GameCube, you will also need to put up with tank controls. It's awful, I know. If, however, you play the HD remaster of the remake, yes, Capcom is very good with names, I know. There is actually an option for a more modern movement system that some may find much more comfortable. This new control scheme operates sort of like a top-down Metal Gear Solid game, where your character just charges full speed ahead in whatever direction you press. Essentially, if you play the re-release of the remake on Xbox One, PS4, or Steam, you'll have the option of a new control scheme you might enjoy more. If you prefer tank controls, you can simply play with this option off. This is actually how I like to enjoy the game. Yeah, call me a boomer, I'm used to it. All that being said, I think it's fair to say the remake gets a point here, since you get the ability to choose how you want to move around, something that's not very common in the Resident Evil series. That leaves us with a 0 to 1, with Resident Evil Remake taking the lead so far, but there's lots of ground to cover, and the next few sections might actually shock you. Let's talk about charm, because I got my rose-tinted glasses already. One of the things that makes older games so fun to play, in my opinion, is just how charming the primitive technology is, and also just like the wacky shit that just goes on for no reason. Older games tended to take themselves much less seriously, or were restrained by very small budgets, a very deadly combination that leads to a handful of ridiculously bizarre things that happen in the original Resident Evil.
Wesker!
You can't really get it anywhere else, man. Resident Evil 1 has a lot of really cheesy, bizarrely funny audio. The zombies groaning and moving around are the total opposite of scary. They sound like a dude just heavily humming and moaning into a tiny microphone that they're right on the cusp of eating. And if we're being honest for a second, that's probably exactly what it is. Despite how cheesy the audio is though, it's still really well designed and sticks around in your head for eons. These are incredibly memorable sounds. Speaking of memorable, man, the acting in the original game probably birthed thousands of memes at this point. Lines like, "I have this," and "Master of Unlocking," and "Chris, stop it," and "Jill Sandwich," everything. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The original game was written and acted out like it was made by aliens trying to blend in with us. It's just too funny.
Ah, it's the Moonlight Sonata.
The reason I'm going on and on about this is because this was unfortunately cut from the remake. In the remake, a lot of scenes are much more emotionally tense and serious. This has the added benefits of characters being able to better express themselves emotionally. Characters don't have to say obvious lines like,
What is this?
because this is the new direction that allows them to say so much more with just their faces. And this works so well until the occasional moment where it just falls flat for no reason. Jill will watch someone get eaten by dogs right in front of her, and then somehow she just remains completely static. She's like a cardboard cutout. And then purely because this game was starting to be developed towards the dark era of Capcom, there were a couple things that snuck in that really clash with the more serious nature of the game. Jill's chest for no reason whatsoever is just very bouncy. Okay, come on Capcom, you can't have the lightning suspensefully light up the room just to show me Jill's bouncy members. The way Chris runs is just like, what is that? I hate that I keep having to bring up Metal Gear Solid in this video, but like, this looks like Kojima animated it, you know? By far the biggest thing working against the remake is just the fact that it just doesn't stick in my memory like the original game does. When I think of Resident Evil 1, I think of the cutscenes from the original game. I don't really think of any of the ones from the remake, except for the very bizarre ones, like Jill watching her homie get eaten like right in front of her. So I hope you can agree with me that Resident Evil 1 tends to make the bigger impression overall. It's just the game that I remember the most fondly, so I kind of have to give it the point for charm. That leaves the scoreboard at 1-1. I get the feeling this is going to be a pretty close fight. Don't worry, there's no spoilers. I'm not going to explain the whole story of these games because I imagine you're watching this video to help you decide which game to play, which means you likely haven't played either one. And if you played both and you clicked on this video just out of curiosity, then I hope you'll agree with what I have to say. I'll try to briefly explain how the games handle the story differently without giving too much away. Resident Evil 1 has a very simple but still engaging story. It's centered around a big mystery inside this mansion, and the team members who are with you exploring it. There's plot twists, betrayals, sequences where you gotta keep people alive, etc. One thing the original game excels at is player agency. Resident Evil 1 has a lot of hidden choices the player can make, and depending on what the player does throughout the game, actually determines the fates of several characters, and when you can access which rooms, what items you'll get, etc, etc. The whole game is kinda like a roguelike, except obviously it's not random at all. It's just, you know, on your first couple playthroughs they might seem very random. It's something to incentivize the player to play the game multiple times, just to see what else is possible. Which is a good thing because these games don't tend to be very long. A lot of these opportunities are not as prominent in the remake, however. Because some bosses and enemies were moved around, some of these events had to be scrapped or replaced entirely. The remake does overhaul and fix some of the decisions it keeps in. For example, there's a sequence in the game with Jill's campaign where you have to deliver medicine to save someone's life. In the original game, no matter how fast you did this, as far as I understand, the character still dies. In Remake, however, this same scenario crops up and you can actually deliver the medicine fast enough to get a reward for it. The Remake makes up for less of this player agency with fleshing out old lore and adding in completely new lore. There are more details in Remake's overall plot that make it so much more tragic than the original game, without also excessively cutting out and retconning elements of the original as well. Honestly, I want to give both of these games a point because both of them deserve it. They both tackle their story in different ways but end up at around the same level. That leaves us at 2-2 with the original and Remake at the same score. It'll be the remaining categories to determine who comes out on top. Like any other survival horror game, Resident Evil has a large interconnected map that has regular backtracking and item-based progression. But which version of the mansion is the more fun of the two? A regular staple of Resident Evil maps is having puzzles to complete in many of the rooms. In the original RE, the puzzles are simple sometimes, and very cryptic and confusing other times. Some puzzles in RE1 are downright even frustrating. This is where the Remake has an edge, because it gets to remake all of these puzzles and go back and fix the ones that didn't really work. And that's exactly what Remake did. Many puzzles and often entire rooms are completely revamped and redesigned from the ground up. The shark tank under the guardhouse, for example, used to be just a big room with a tank in it and like a couple of sharks. It was very underwhelming. Now in Remake, it actually looks like a large containment tank that could actually exist in a world like Resident Evil's. And now you even have to escape the massive shark, Neptune, that is held captive. And on top of that, Neptune becomes a boss fight. This is just one of the areas in the game that got just such a massive glow up. And do you want to know the craziest part? Here's some absolutely insane Capcom game development lore. All throughout development, Resident Evil 1 Remake was just going to be a 100% faithful remake of the original game, meaning there weren't even supposed to be any of these adjustments or additional mechanics that the remake introduced. However, just a few months before launch, the team decided to surprise veteran RE players by integrating entirely new content and overhauling old content. That's right, all of the amazing changes I just talked about happened last minute, right before they sent the disc to the presses. A truly batshit insane play that pays off massively. Compared to all of this, the map in the original game just feels so dull and small. That leaves us with a 2-3, with the remake taking the lead. This is going to be another close one because it honestly depends on who you ask. I personally really like the music in RE1 Remake. I think they did a stellar job redoing the original game soundtrack. It captures a lot of the same energy as the original game, but sounds much higher quality and even further fleshes out many of the tracks. That being said, if you've watched my videos before, you know that I also use a lot of music from the original PS1 trilogy instead of the remake tracks. I personally just really like retro game music, especially music from the PS1 and arcade eras. And I gotta be honest guys, the music in the original Resident Evil just never escapes my mind. Sadly, this also applies to the director's cut kitchen music, if you know what I'm talking about. It's horrible. I constantly hear the music from this game while I'm out and about in my daily life. There's something about scary music from an old game that just feels so unique. Obviously, modern day horror games can have amazing soundtracks, but many just opt to be really quiet or completely silent throughout most of the experience. I don't remember half of the songs that played in Resident Evil Village. Not saying the music in that game is bad, I've actually used some of it in my videos before, but this is kind of what Remake suffers from as well. It's great music, but it just doesn't stick out the same way it did in the original game. So despite what you'd expect, I like the original tracks way more. However, I use music from both versions of the game just about equally, as I think they both are good enough to listen to on their own. So I think the best way to keep it fair is to once again give a point to both. That means we're at 3-4, with Remake still in the lead. Now let's talk about enemies and bosses. I'm gonna be upfront with you, this is an easy win for the remake, for similar reasons we've discussed before. I talked about the developers overhauling the map in an earlier section, and a lot of my feelings also apply to the enemies. The biggest addition that really makes the game so much better are the Crimson Heads. In the original Resident Evil, if you kill a zombie, it's gone for good. It might be replaced with a bigger, more deadlier enemy later, but for the most part, enemies just don't come back. The game gives you plenty of ammo to kill just about every zombie in the game, as long as you're not being wasteful with it. Remake is an entirely different story. In Resident Evil Remake, when you kill a zombie, the body will stay lying on the ground. You might think this is a cool immersion detail, but believe it or not, this is part of a global game mechanic that was added in as part of the remake. When you come back to that room later, that corpse will rise and it will mutate into an even more powerful zombie. This is called a Crimson Head, and let me tell you, these guys are hard. Not only do they have way more health, move faster than you do, and are capable of killing you on the spot, the way you create them is by consuming ammo, which means you have less ammo on you by the time you have to face one. Remake took the concept of the zombies and flipped it completely on its head, and as a result, added in even more strategic gameplay. If you need to kill a zombie but don't want to deal with a Crimson Head later, you need to shoot it dead first, then light its corpse on fire. The corpse will burn away and the zombie will be gone for good. You can also decapitate it, but that means you need to absolutely land a headshot and cause the head to explode. If you don't absolutely need to kill a zombie, it encourages you to try to simply run around it or consider taking an alternate path. All of that is just explaining the impact of just one enemy. The remake introduces new bosses and even makes major changes to others. There's even a new enemy archetype that was carried over into future remakes, known as the Stalker. In this game, that would be Lisa Trevor, but this is what eventually wound up inspiring RE2 Remake's rendition of Mr. X and Lady D down the line. All of these changes result in the remake being much harder than the original, and I love it. I love hard games, even though I'm very, very bad at them, so it's right up my alley. So hopefully you can agree, Remake deserves a point here. That leaves us at 3-5, with Remake pushing further in the lead. Can the original game catch up? We'll just have to see. You might think the remake gets this one instantly, but I personally happen to really like the way the original game looks more. I don't know why, maybe it's just me being a PlayStation 1 fanboy again, but it cannot be overstated just how insane this game looked at the time. There are really good looking PS1 games like Metal Gear Solid, god I'm bringing it up again, that are fully 3D rendered, and personally, I think MGS looks a smidge better than RE overall. But look at the textures and animations and models, man. I can compare this to a handful of other PS1 games, and let me tell you, few can really say they have characters this detailed. For example, Final Fantasy VII also has pre-rendered backgrounds, but their character models are basically tiny chibis with eyes drawn on in solid colors. Which is funny because you get into battle in that game and it's like the polar opposite, but whatever. Resident Evil beats other pre-rendered games by a landslide. This has the added effect of the game actually aging pretty well, even when upscaled to 4K like you're seeing right now. The pre-rendered backgrounds are still really pixelated, obviously, but as far as the actual 3D elements go, Resident Evil 1 and the rest of the trilogy looks much better at higher resolutions than most PS1 games. Ironically enough, this cannot be said about the remake. When remastering the remake, Capcom actually lost the source code for the original GameCube version of the game. This meant that the remaster is like that of an emulated GameCube game, adjusted to run on different hardware, with a few scripts and hacks running to increase the resolution and the frame rate. It also implements widescreen and the previously mentioned new control scheme as well. If any of you still remember the Super Mario 3D All-Stars debacle from the Nintendo world, yeah, it's comparable to the hacky way Nintendo made that. This means that the models and backgrounds in the remaster are still those from when the game came out in the early 2000s. At least when you emulate a PS1 game, you're kind of expecting to be able to count the polygons. But this was a game being passed off as a remaster, and they really didn't touch much. The GameCube models are still really good, but you can definitely tell that they are GameCube models. This makes the game look a little odd at higher resolutions, or the lack thereof, which is another gripe. The remaster is available natively on PC through Steam. However, I had to literally mod my game just to get it running in 4K, and it's not even really 4K. It displays the game in a 4K size window, but the render resolution looks like it's stuck between 720p and 1080p, so it looks worse than it would out of the box. It looks like garbage. It was a pain in the ass. I turned it off and just played in 1080p and just upscaled my footage in post, because god, I hated it so much. The resolution cap is 1920 by 1200. This means if you're playing on a 1440p monitor, good luck, because you're going to need it when you're dealing with weird scaling. And if you're playing on a 4K monitor like mine, you're staring at extra chunky pixels. Not really what comes to mind when you think of HD remaster. Given the community really hasn't found a way to get 4K to be functional in this game, it might have just not been possible for Capcom to do themselves. It's just such a bizarre thing. Like, why can this game not run in 4K? Not that it would do much anyways, because it would only make the pre-rendered backgrounds of the game worse. Once again, because Capcom lost the source code, they just kind of upped the resolution, but didn't do much about the pre-rendered backgrounds. In my footage, I use a mod that grabbed the backgrounds from the GameCube version and then AI upscaled them, then imported them back into the remaster. I also use another mod called Reshade that is running some sharpening and other effects. However, this game also seems to hate Reshade for some reason. This game is almost literally unmoddable. What I'm saying before I get off track is that my footage looks way better than it actually looks. Trust me, vanilla game, it hasn't aged the best visually. Who would have ever guessed that the PS1 game might actually have been the more future-proof in the long run? Given how much Capcom cares about preserving their old games, it's actually really baffling that they lost the source code to a game, especially one that frankly isn't even that old in the grand scheme of things. It's ultimately subjective which one you like, and you're free to disagree with me, but just for the technical argument that I just gave, I think I have to give the point to RE1 Original. That leaves us with a 4-5, with RE96 closing the gap but Remake still in the lead. This is another section that would honestly depend on who you ask. In Resident Evil 96, the game was very bright and felt like a bad horror movie. This sounds like a bad thing, but remember that I gave this game a point in the charm section. I just love how cheesy this game is. Of course, scary stuff still happens. At the time, RE was considered a scary game, in spite of the really brightly lit and simple environments and, you know, the sound effects that we previously discussed. Enemies will jump scare you and troll you, and nothing will ever compare to the raw anxiety of literally not being able to see what's around the corner, especially on your last ink ribbon. I've seen people say that the mansion in the original game is more believable than how it looks in Remake. I have to say I can somewhat agree. The mansion in the original RE looks like someone left in a hurry and forgot to turn out the lights, which explains why the game would be so bright. In the original game, I can believe that the Spencer Mansion was meant to house tons of people, and that something must have gone horribly wrong to cause everyone to abandon it. However, if we pivot over to the remake, I can actually believe that the Spencer Mansion is more than meets the eye, more than in the original. In Remake, the mansion looks much more gothic and it's way darker. Lightning will flash through windows to briefly illuminate the map for a split second. It's all decked out with stylized, elegant furniture in every room and dark polished wood making up every camera angle of every interior. With a more oddly designed, for lack of a better word, spooky mansion, it's a lot easier for me personally to believe that Umbrella had bigger plans for this place than just a living quarters, which given how many underground passages and secret labs they have in the general vicinity of the mansion, would actually be correct. Remember, they're supposed to be creating a virus and running experiments here. The traps and puzzles also feel much more believable in Remake as well for this reason. This place clearly had a lot of work and money put into it, and I feel the gothic theme of the mansion better reflects that. They're hiding something, so it only makes sense that they leave as many dark rooms as possible. I have to once again give both games a point. That leaves us at 5-6, with Remake still barely in the lead. You've probably noticed now that I've given out double points and are probably curious why I keep doing it. Because RE1 is such a good game, it does a lot of things really well right off the bat. Because Remake is such a faithful remake that then overhauls everything on top of it, it adopts many of what RE1 already does well. So it's actually really hard in some places to say one game does one thing better. That being said, that won't be the case for the next section. This is going to be a stupidly easy win for the remake, I'll just be upfront about it. Given what I already talked about during the maps and enemy sections, it's clear that Remake has a huge advantage over the original Resident Evil. OG RE was re-released several times on different platforms, each subsequent release adding more content. But these games didn't get the full massive overhaul that Remake got. Also, Remake is just a longer game in general. I'm not the kind of guy who makes purchasing decisions for video games purely based on length, but if you are, I mean, there you go. In the interest of not making this section longer than necessary, I think it's fair to say Remake simply has way more content, even compared to the DS port, which we'll actually talk about in a bit. That leaves us with 5-7, with Remake stepping further in the lead. Between the two games, which one would be the most obtainable? We talked a bit about accessibility when talking about controls and determined that the HD remaster of the remake, god I hate that name, was the best in terms of actually playing the game. Now we're going to talk accessibility as in actually getting your hands on the game. What is the easiest way to get your hands on the original Resident Evil? Let's start by going about it legally. If you wanted a PlayStation 1 copy of Resident Evil, you'll be paying more for it than a full price modern day game. Not only that, but if you don't have a PS1 already, you'd have to avoid getting scammed and being sold a broken or a fake one. And getting a working one isn't exactly cheap either. Honestly, you could probably buy a whole ass PS4 or an Xbox Series S for the kind of money you might need to spend just to play one game. Okay, so let's veer away from PS1. The game has been re-released on other platforms, right? Luckily for you, Resident Evil was ported over to the DS, and it's widely regarded as one of the best ports ever. The map is actually fully 3D rendered, so there's a first-person event that happens where you slash at zombies with your knife, for example. There's also Rebirth mode, which is essentially a remixed version of the game. You can play that after you play classic mode. And it even has multiplayer, which is pretty insane. This port was serious business. I wasn't joking, this is probably the best version of the original RE, and it's on a fucking DS, man. Here on the used market in the US, you can have your hands on a copy for, oh shit. Yeah, it's fair to say that legally playing Resident Evil is probably not possible for many people. Even if you did have hundreds of dollars to drop just to play one video game, it's still a difficult thing to justify doing. Well, it's difficult to justify if you're responsible and you don't spend money on stupid shit like me. I'm the idiot who spent $400 to buy Street Fighter 6 twice. Now, what if we did the funny illegal sus gamer tactics? Obviously, if you're against piracy, this is not an option either. Me personally, I'm not a party pooper when it comes to piracy. I don't like to judge people for it at all. As a matter of fact, I do it all the time. What? You thought I bought a $100 copy of a PS1 game, then converted it into a ROM that I can run on DuckStation? Which, by the way, that's still somehow illegal. Don't ask me how, that's just what the law decided for some reason. Nah, man, I downloaded it because fuck everything, man. I just want an old fucking video game. Let me live my life. When we bring piracy into the picture, Resident Evil is actually incredibly easy to get your hands on, including the DS version. Who would have thought? It's almost as if the whole point of piracy is to obtain shit. I'm not going to tell you how or where to look because I can't, but you're a smart cookie. I'm sure you know a little friendly search engine that can help you. Or ask your friends because I'm pretty sure they're downloading video games right now. Yeah, Kyle, I see you downloading all 3 discs of Final Fantasy VII. You can't hide from me. Just be diligent, but wear fake download buttons and keep yourself safe out there, alright? If you've already modded your DS or 3DS, then boom, you probably know exactly the place to go to as well. Deadly Silence for the DS is particularly cool because it has tons of really cool stuff that no other versions of the game have. If you got that in like a few Monster Hunter games, you'll be glued to that modded 3DS, let me tell you. Now let's talk about the remake. If we were talking exclusively the GameCube version, then yeah, let me say your luck is just as bad as ever. It's a little more affordable, but do you really want to drop half the price of a PS5 game on a fucking GameCube game? And that assumes you still have a working GameCube. Look, I know you've had your GameCube on for decades to unlock Mew 3 and Melee. Who are we fooling? Shit's probably on fire in your attic right now. Go get the extinguisher, my guy. It's safe to say GameCube is a bit of a lost cause. But that's where the HD remaster comes in to save the day, my friends. The HD remaster of the remake. Oh, fucking Christ. It's available on PS4, Xbox One, Steam, and presumably you can run it on the PS5 and series consoles. I don't own it on those, so I'm just telling you presumably because I couldn't test it. The winning blow for the remake here is you can buy it now. Literally, right now. Go boot up your current gen system of choice, go to the store, type Resident Evil, you'll probably see it. You can have it right now if you really wanted to. That cannot be said about the original game. Unless you pirate, I guess. Yeah, that makes this 5'8", which is dangerously close to my minuscule height. Holy shit. Remake is still in the lead. It'll be a tough fight to claw back from now. I figured I would throw this in just to highlight how the larger RE community sees these games. The Resident Evil community seems very divisive about which of these two are the better. I've done my research and it's essentially an even split. For example, I went to GameFAQs and everyone kind of unanimously really liked the original. But if I go to Reddit, everyone unanimously really likes the remake. And Twitter, well, everyone's drawing R34 on Twitter. The fuck did you expect? What I can say is both of these games are extensively documented by the community. There's not one that's better written or like better guide, I don't know, better walkthroughable than the other game. So it's not like if you pick one, you're going to be up shit's creek. Just remember that you're gonna search something, and if you're talking about the original game, you're probably gonna find something for Remake. And if you're searching for something in Remake, you're probably going to find something from the original game. Just keep that in mind, because I've been doing research for this video, and this just kept happening. It makes it very confusing. So I'd have to give both of these games a point, because they both left a lasting impression on the entire community. I'm pretty sure my comment section will likely be a war of people who like the original, and then the other people who like the remake, but it's the internet, man. All of the wars get fought on YouTube comments for some reason. That'll get us to 6-9. Nice. This is the second from last section. I want to talk about survival and then horror next, since these are the two big elements that make up Resident Evil, and they're pretty fitting for the end of this fight. Which of these games is better survival-wise? If you ask me, it would have to be the original. I know it's another hot take, but hear me out for a second. The remake adds in a lot of mechanics that give you interesting options for how to get around zombies, like daggers. However, the remake for some reason just feels a tiny bit more actiony. I really don't know why it just does. I can't put my finger on it. But for some reason in remake, I find myself killing way more zombies than running. Keep in mind, this is the game that spites you for killing by spawning a crimson head. These things are supposed to deter me from killing, yet I keep finding myself doing it. Zombies feel a little too hard to kite around in remake. They have a lot of reach and can grab you more easily than in the original. I think the daggers are supposed to compensate for this, but the problem is I don't want to waste a dagger trying to get around the zombie. This is like my brain working against me. I find I'll just shoot a zombie dead and not really get any of the satisfaction of outsmarting it. Maybe it's just me and absolutely no one else agrees, and that's fine, but I feel the original just barely does survival better. I absolutely still love Remake, and I think Remake is more fun to play in terms of gameplay sometimes. But if we're talking raw, hard, full survival, then play Resident Evil 2. But also play OG Resident Evil 1. There's something to be said about that original gauntlet from 1996. Now, if what I said doesn't justify it for you, let me remind you that there was an infinite grenade glitch in the remake. This was patched out in the remaster, I believe. At least I've never been able to do it. But the remake had a huge infinite grenade bug, which is definitely not something you want to have in a survival game. So yeah, the score is now 7-9. Remake is dangerously close to winning, and the next category is horror. So even though Remake lost here, it still has a really good chance at the gold. Now, if we're going to talk Resident Evil, I think it's fitting we talk about horror. Both of these games are pretty scary to say the least. Even with the primitive and kind of silly looking nature of the original, there were still times where I felt genuine anxiety playing through that game. The game does know how to give you a decent scare all the way back on the PS1. However, Remake takes the scary factor and cranks it up to 11. I nearly shat myself playing Remake, I'm gonna be honest with you. It's dark everywhere and the enemies are placed just trollishly enough to make you unsure of every turn in the mansion. Even if not actual terror, the game's new properties get your heart racing. There's nothing like the feeling in your stomach when you hear a Crimson Head spawn and start running. We have Lisa Trevor appearing when you least expect it, sending you into a panic attack because now the pressure is on, man. You not only gotta get out of there, but you gotta get your ass out of there as fast as possible. I hope you can all agree with me, the remake is a scarier game, which brings us to 7-10, with the remake in the lead, which means... I hope you guys like that little montage I had for you, because it's going to make it impossible to make money on this video. Congratulations to our winner, Resident Evil Remake. As a reward for your patronage, you get to be injected with the T-virus and die a very painful death. Everyone, this is the craziest ending I could have expected. Let me be the first to tell you that I'm actually a simp for the original game. As much as I love the remake, and as much as I think it is the better game for newcomers, I had a hunch this video was going to be biased towards the original version. Imagine my surprise when I was creating all these categories and writing all of this script, only to find that Remake just kept nailing everything, man. It makes me a lot more confident that I did a decent job picking the categories. If you disagree, that's fine, and once again, RE Original isn't a bad game, not at all. But I think it's fair to say that Remake has a lot going for it, on top of being the most easily accessible. While it has its issues, it's definitely an amazing first step into the world of Resident Evil. If you want an idea of how bad it can really get, my first RE game was Resident Evil 0, so I think it could do a lot worse than Remake, just saying. I do hope this video managed to remain exciting and keep you tense and on the edge of your seat all the way to the end, man. It was a long fight, but I think our winner earned it. I would like to give massive shout outs to a handful of my subscribers who haven't gotten one yet. I got quite a big backlog of these guys, so expect me to be shouting people across the next couple of videos. Big ups to Dinero Cook, Jacob Buchamp, Austrian femboy lover, that's based, Bra Momento, Akuji Nirnasha, oh god, Akuji Nirnasha, fucking hell, Gravity, Nico _ JVM, Kazama, nice profile pic, Critic Men, John Richardson, Humberto Rodriguez, I guess TTF, I don't know, TEEHTF, we'll work with that, Elizim, oh god, I can't read half of these, SSJW Togarashi, I mean, oh my god, SSJ4, I'm assuming that's a Dragon Ball thing. SSJ4 Togarashi, Firmbomb UK, Jamie Daniel Vincent, DJ Ferg, Gaming Cantina, Blankcast, and Finners. Yeah, we're probably gonna have to progressively do more and more people each time I do these subscriber shoutouts because I'm not gonna fucking catch up otherwise. All right, here comes a few more just to play it safe. We got Moira, Burko Chan, Kinney46, Virgil, all lowercase. It's really him, guys. Ferris Zakimi, Swapan. I'm guessing that's how it's pronounced. Tank 2410. Nice profile picture. Zex DST, or is that Zex Peanut Butter? Puzzle Puffs. Polera. Fucking hell. Is that supposed to be Spanish? Pollera? Pollera Colorado. I don't know. Claire Asgard. Claire Alsgard. 4DEV. Omnizarity. Sasha Pines. Nguyen Hein Ho. I'm guessing that's how it's pronounced. Correct me if I'm wrong. Detonator, Magnesium Rot MG, Data Bayo, Hunter Culpepper, and Gray _. Thank you guys so much. And hey, if you liked the video or you want your name in a video like these guys, please subscribe to become a followee. What's a followee? It's like a groupie following a rock star, except there's no sex and there's no drugs. It's more fun than it sounds, I promise. For real though, if you did enjoy this video, now's the time you think about helping me out a bit because it did take me a lot of effort to make. Plus there's more like this coming soon, hint hint. I can think of a couple other properties I would like to do the same battle with. Now, I gotta get my desperate ass out of here. I hope all of you have a great one.